Hi everyone, so welcome back to my mini-series on the psychological haunting subgenre. Now in the first video of the series we had a look at what the subgenre of psychological haunting horror actually consisted of. We had a talk through some small minor techniques, but today is about kind of delving into the depths of some of those techniques. Within this project I was really interested in researching more into how to implement the feeling of dread and fear into your pieces. And one of the most effective techniques that you come across is something called pitch bending. Now, using pitch is such a simple way of pushing your audience to feel a certain emotion. I'm going to be using Logic on my laptop today, but don't worry, a lot of the things that I talk through, I'll also just be explaining generally how you can use it within your pieces to create dread, so that you could use it on the software that you've got at home. Now, the first technique that I'm going to talk through is a very obvious and a very popular technique that a lot of composers are using. It's the shepherd tone. Now, the shepherd tone is this amazing auditory illusion that consists of lots of sine waves separated by octaves, continuously moving upwards or downwards in a sequence. As one extreme of the tones, either at the top or the bottom, fades, another one begins, and this sequence just continues and repeats and repeats and repeats. Our brains don't really perceive this change because there's always at least two tones playing at the same time. With all of the tones constantly moving either up or down, you can just create this really amazing feeling. You use an ascending shepherd's tone, you can just continue amping up the track with this suspense, which is the way that I've used it in my track. If you use a descending shepherd's tone, it just makes this brain-melting feeling. One of the most recent and very popular uses of it was by Hans Zimmer in his soundtrack for the film Dunkirk. Now, Hans Zimmer used the shepherd's tone to a very extreme way, by keeping it constantly going throughout the whole entire film. You don't particularly need to use it for that long, but it's a very useful technique to use as you maybe come to the end of your track or to a point of terror or suspense. You can contain this continuous suspense in your piece by just simply using the shepherd's tone. Now let's have a look at how I use the shepherd's tone idea within this piece. I took the way that the shepherd's tone works by continuously rising through a sequence and applied that to my piece. I used a plugin called Club Siren, which is included in Logic. Now, Club Siren pretty much does the shepherd's tone for you. It continuously rises in a sequence, but then you can definitely hear when it drops. So, to combat that and create the shepherd tone sound, all I had to do was duplicate the tracks and duplicate the sound, which meant then the sequences just play over the top of each other and have that continuous rise, just like the shepherd tone idea. Look in my project here. You can see my 3 Club Siren tracks are soloed. You can see it's towards the end of the track that I've used this. Now, the reason that I've soloed them is because I really want to just concentrate on the sounds that we're going to be editing, so that you don't get lost in all the clutter of the rest of the sound. Now let's have a listen to the way that I've used the shepherd's tone with the Club Siren preset. Can you hear those sequences going over the top of each other? You could just hear how effective it is to use the shepherd's tone to create that suspense. It's a really cool warping atmosphere, isn't it? So that you can just amp up whatever feeling you want to. Even though I only used it on a few seconds at the end, it makes all the difference to the end of my piece. Now, we're going to have a look at actual pitch bending within Logic. I've used quite a lot of it within this track. So, we're now going to have a look at some of the individual tracks where I've used it most prominently. Now I'm going to focus on the track that I've called Arctic Noise Lead. Arctic Noise Lead is a Logic preset, but I've kind of altered it a little bit, so it might not sound exactly the same if you just loaded it up fresh. Now, can you see those little green lines that are next to our different tracks? That shows me that I've used pitch bend on these tracks. To be able to view that pitch bend in more detail so that I could alter it, you simply just have to go to View. The little menu on the top of your tracks, if you click that, you'll see a little menu come up called MIDI Draw. And if you then go all the way down, it's in bold for me and ticked because obviously I've used it, but if you haven't used it before, it will just be the same as all the others. If you click onto that, you can then enable pitch bend. Sometimes you do have to just change the size of your tracks by just going over to your vertical And there you go, there's the green dots of automation. Now you can see there's a slight difference between my Arctic Noise Lead first one, which I'm circling now, and the second track of Arctic Noise Lead, which I'm circling now. Now the difference between those two is the first one, I've actually used the mod wheel. And on the second one, that was just drawn in, which is simply a click and a drag, which can then alter how the pitch bend works when you're playing it. Let's have a look at how the mod wheel would actually write in your automation as you're recording it. I'm going to go along to the end, and then you'll start hearing the pitch bend as I start playing. Can you see the lines being drawn in? And then if we play it back, you can start to hear the automation. Now, can you see that I can't actually see my automation? Because sometimes when you record with the mod wheel, it sometimes doesn't show up the way that it would do if you just clicked pitch bend. So, you now need to just go down and double click the pitch bend. That way I can move around the automation points to change what I've just done. I love using the mod wheel, mainly because it makes it unpredictable. You can take your note and you can move it around whichever way you want to. You can make people feel uncomfortable by putting them on edge with this unpredictable sound. And I think it just makes this really eerie addition to what we have going on in this piece. The mod wheel is a godsend when you're trying to create some really cool effects. I spent so long just using a keyboard without a mod wheel thinking, I don't need that, it's fine, I can just draw it in. And then as soon as I got my new keyboard, which had a mod wheel, it just changed everything. I kind of have to stop myself using it in every single piece, otherwise it would just become too mundane. Now I will just quickly mention the second way which you can view your pitch bend automation. You can see that I have my window here. Now, if you want to start editing the automation, and you realise that the way of going view, pitch bend with MIDI draw isn't working and it's not showing up, the second way that you can go about it is by going to your edit window. It's the little scissors up at the top. If you click on that, it then brings up this window, and you can see our pitch bend automation down the bottom. Now this one, you can also do a lot more automation with it. I won't show you today, mainly because I just didn't use it in this piece, but it's something to consider when you're creating your tracks. If you click onto the controller menu, you can see there's a whole list of things that you can change, and this is particularly useful if you're trying to make your MIDI sound more realistic, sound a bit more like you've live recorded. For example, if you wanted to control breath, or you wanted to control expression and things like that, it can then just alter the way that it's played. It just makes it sound a little bit more like somebody's actually playing it, rather than it's just you sat there on a keyboard. Now secondly, another technique that I have loved using is Logic's Flex Pitch. Now Flex is just this really cool way to create, for me, these glitchy sounds. It can just send your sound over the edge and just make it really unique. Now I'm going to be using a particular audio track, which I'm using an orchestral riser. Now firstly, I'm just going to show you how different it sounds. Now this riser is from Premium Beats' free trailer construction version. There's a few kind of impact moments and some atmospheric things. Now the one I particularly used I'm going to be showing you today is the orchestral brass riser, highlighted there. Now let's have a look at how it sounds before I've edited it. There's lots of brass, there's lots of vibrato, and it sounds awesome, but it wasn't what I wanted. So, now let's have a look at how it sounds when I've done something to it. It sounds very strange, doesn't it? But that's the effect that I wanted to achieve. Yes, it sounds really fake. Yes, you can hear that I've edited it, and yes, you can hear almost the awful pitch jumps everywhere. But that's what I wanted. I didn't want something that everyone could go, cool, that's a brass riser, oh, that's quite suspenseful. I wanted something that everyone's just going, what the hell is going on? So I'm going to show you some few things that you can use to create something like that. Or you can just use some of the parameters that I'll talk through to just edit your own way. Now, to achieve the different flex pitch, we need to go to the edit window again. Just like we did with the pitch automation, it's the little scissors up at the top left hand of the screen. If we click that, it brings up this window here, which has track and file at the top. Now, because obviously flex pitch is already enabled on my track, you can automatically see the flex pitch happening. But if you hadn't used it before, you'll see this little button here in grey, and you'll see your track like that. So we're going to enable the flex so that we can start altering it. So if you click the little flex to show it, it brings up this. Now it might automatically be on something else on our little window at the top here, but if you select flex pitch, it will bring up these little boxes everywhere on the top of your audio track. Now let's zoom into one of these. Let's take this one for example. Now you can see there's a few dots go surrounding that box. I'll take you through what these dots mean. The left and the right hand dot at the top here that I'm circling are the ones that you can change the pitch bend in and out. So you can see that I'm moving the pitch as it bends into the note. Or if I go to the end, you can see that I can also pitch bend the end of the note. Now another little different one is that the bottom left hand corner one is our gain. So it's basically just how loud your note is going to be. The middle one is your vibrato. So you can smooth out a note if you want to, or you can just make it really hectic. And then you've also got the format shift. Now the format shift is actually one that I didn't really use, but I know it's particularly useful when you've recorded vocals. You can kind of add this resonance and almost this natural feel to your notes by editing it slightly, but if you go too extreme, you might start sounding a little bit like Mickey Mouse. Now the top centre one is just the pitch, so you can start altering very, very fine tune of the pitch. So if you start playing something in and it's maybe a semitone out, you can actually alter that by clicking on the fine pitch and moving it up or down. This can also be done on the side menu over here that I'm circling. The pitch correction means that it will actually match each of those notes to a particular note on the keyboard within Logic. So you can see a lot of my notes are half off, but if I pitch correct it to 100, it then sets it on a note on the keyboard. I obviously don't really want that, but again, if your instrument is just slightly out, you can use that to correct the sound. Now, if you want a really good quality pitch correcting and editing, Logic isn't the way to go. I would recommend using things maybe like Melodyne, but there's lots of software out there that's better than Logic if you want a really clean-cut pitch correcting. The reason why I use my pitch correcting on Logic is because I didn't really need it to sound clean. I didn't really need that technically good quality sound. I wanted that glitchy, weird sound that everyone sort of doesn't really know where it's about to jump to. But using Flex on Logic is a really good way to just alter those audio tracks into something really unique for you. It might take a moment to figure out where you need to adjust to make the sound that you want to, but it's just really worth looking into if you want to start making some really unique sounds. Now, one final method I'm going to go through isn't really a technical method. It's not a very elegant method either. Now, the reason I've left this till last is because it's a little bit silly, but it achieves the sound that I wanted to, so who cares? Now, you can see that I actually have this mess of sound at the top there in the labs of frozen strings. It's quite a lot to handle, isn't it? And I didn't play each of those notes in separately. This is my weird approach to create this strange riser. Let's have a listen to it. You can hear it's kind of this weird crush of sound, isn't it? Now, the way that I created that was, what should we call this? Either the cat walked up the piano or you fell asleep on your keyboard. Now, the one reason I've only used this in one track is because A, it's a very particular sound, but also it uses so much CPU, it's ridiculous. Now, the way that I combat that, something just a small mention that I will say in case some of you are having a bit of trouble with it, is called freezing tracks. Now, I'll briefly mention this, but if you have a lot of CPU intensive processes going on, and Logic does eat up CPU all the time, you can actually freeze tracks. Now, freezing tracks basically creates this temporary bounced file of the track that you've created, so that it's not playing through lots and lots of MIDI notes all the time. It's playing a pre-bounced track, but then you can always just go in and out of freezing so that you can edit it really quickly. To be able to freeze your tracks, it's kind of this little snowflake, but you won't see that if you open up Logic. What you need to have first is your advanced tools enabled. Now, I obviously already have my advanced tools enabled, but if you don't, it's a simple process. You go to Logic Pro X, the bold name in the corner, you go to Preferences, and then you go down to Advanced Tools. Now, obviously, if you brought this up and you don't have Advanced Tools enabled, none of these boxes will be ticked. But you show the Advanced Tools, and then you can go down and you can click Enable All. And that enables all the little intricate details that are just sort of make it so much easier to use Logic. You need to right-click and go down to Track Header Components. There's a whole list of things that you could then add onto your track header components if it makes it easier for you to compose. But there's one called Freeze. Now, if you tick that, it then brings up our little snowflake, and that's where you can then press the snowflake and it freezes that track, creating that bounced file, so then you could go on about sort of editing other tracks without that track eating up the CPU and causing like system overloads. Creating all these tricks of the ear means that us as composers could just make our audiences become immersed in the scenes. Have fun creating these environments, using pitch to maybe make it a little bit more interesting or adding in those suspenseful moments. I really hope that you've enjoyed listening to this and I hope it's helped. But if you have any questions, as usual, pop them down in the comments and I'll answer them as soon as I can. If you're interested to see about maybe some live recording and some other subgenres, then do check out my other videos. I've covered action and I've covered thriller, and I've covered how I've recorded some of the live guitar into Logic and how important it is to use live instruments. Alright, till the next time guys, bye!